Dr. Michael Gervais, I have been excited for this interview for a long time. It's a long time coming. And I want to, and same thing for your book, and I want to jump into that specifically. I find with a lot of the authors that I speak to, the way that they get the most out of the books are not the ones that they read, but more the one that they write. So I'm curious for you in this journey of writing the first book, what is the biggest lesson that you've kind of learned about yourself?
Hey, James, where do you get your insight from? Like, yes, great question.
Thank you.
I'm equally as excited to have this conversation with you. You are not obviously very smart, but you've got a take, that is fresh and it is insightful and it's sharp. And at the same time, is like there's just a wonderful contour about how you present yourself. James, I'm really just looking forward to this conversation with you. And
Right with
so
you. Thank you.
I'm going to be excited to watch you for a long time coming, hopefully, and how you're going to make a difference in the world, our world. So, all right. So we're both excited. Okay. So
Absolutely.
how did this book change me? Is that the question?
Yeah. What did it impact? Where did it come from?
I struggled with this flippant little, 4-letter word that I made up, inspired by FOMO, fear of missing out. And I thought, it's not what it is for me. For me, it's the fear of people's opinions. I said, oh yeah, FOPO, that sounds fun. And then I wrote an article about it, just like what it is and how I think
Mhm.
it's been one of my greatest constrictors from getting free and going for it and really living the good life. And I wrote an article for HBR and they called 12 months later and they said, okay, you hit a nerve. You were the #1 downloaded article for 12 months in a row.
Mhm.
And so let's do a book about it. And so I knew that it was a thing that I struggled with, but I did not know that it was something that so many of us struggled with. And so one of the ways that it changed me was recognizing the upswell of people that also struggled with it. So that was refreshing in a way that I was like, oh, okay. And then I hadn't done a deep dive into it other than a 3-page article.
Mm.
So to take a 3-page article and round it out with all of the science that would support why FOPO is one of the great constrictors, fear of people's opinions, is one
Mhm.
of the great constrictors for people's potential. I really loved the science that fell into place to support that idea. And then I think it forced me to bring myself forward. So I'm a sports psychologist,
Of course.
and I spent most of my career supporting the best in the world who are extraordinary at what they do. And my job is to be in the background to help them.
Mhm.
And there was like so I sent my first draft over to the editor and he sent it back and he said, well written, but where are you in it?
Mhm.
Where's Mike in this story? And so it forced me to go deep, to be honest, and to bring myself forward about the fears that I struggle with and struggled with. And so that was not something I was comfortable with, and it's super liberating on the other side of it. So that's how I would answer that question, James.
I was really excited to dive into this specifically because I know that your journey started when you were surfing and you practice all you want. You're the greatest person out there, but when it came down to other people being there, you just didn't show up the way that you wanted to. And I resonate so much with that deeply to an extent that I did the same thing on the baseball field. I got picked to be on varsity when I was in ninth or 10th grade and had a starting spot and then blew it because I didn't believe in myself enough to show up the way that I wanted to. And
Mm.
so I feel that so many people struggle with this silently as you speak about. And so I'm curious, what were some of the first things that you kind of worked through to kind of break out of that internal narrative to then be able to reframe it and not fall into that hole that so many of us fall into?
Well, okay, cool question, because it was a slow drip for me. I had a really wise person to describe
Mhm.
trust this way to me. And so we're essentially going to talk about self-trust, but he was talking
Absolutely.
about trust of other people. And he says, trust is okay, how did he put it? He said, Mike, you ever change the oil in your car? I said, yeah. He says, messy job, right? I said, yeah. And he said, imagine filling back up the oil in your car one thimble at a time. That's how you build trust. And I was like, okay, got it. And I think it's the same way with FOPO, is that it takes time. It takes time to work with it because our brain is so powerful. It's one of the most powerful, quote unquote, computers in the world. And the analogy of a computer does break down with the brain, but it's a simple metaphor to extend.
Yeah.
It's one of the most powerful mechanisms in the world. And it is designed to scan the world and find the dangers. That's what it's supposed to do. So left unchecked, left untrained, it will scan the world to find all the things that could potentially kill you, that could be threats to your existence. And 200,000 years ago, people's opinions of you, if you were kicked out of the tribe and critiqued and judged for not being good enough and pushed out, was a near death sentence. And so modern day, our brain hasn't changed that much in 200,000 years, but modern day, we don't have that same need for survival based on the acceptance of other people, but it feels that way in our brain. So it just takes time to work with this because our brain is so powerful. It will win if left unchecked. And this is something to check. And so how does it work? You just spend time recognizing when you stepped on the tripwire of FOPO, when you feel physiologically or psychologically unsettled based on what somebody else might be thinking about you. And when you become aware of that unsettled nature, either mental or physical, when you become aware of it, then you can do something about it. So this book is really just pointing to, first step is be aware that there's a thing happening right underneath the surface for all of us. And if we're not careful, by examining it and working with it, it will win. And what that means is that we will outsource our sense of being okay to other people rather than contribute to the social fabric in a meaningful way based on how we think we can add to this radical ecosystem, this beautiful planet, and this complicated social environment that we live in. How are you going to add to it? How are you going to contribute to it? And if you're reflexively looking for approval from other people, you probably never really bring your full best foot forward, your best self forward. And I would say that it's really hard to live, quote unquote, the good life if you're always looking for approval from other people.
I'm right with you. And I'm also with you on the fact that if we're not aware of why it's happening to begin with, there's no way forward. And I often say that we are dealing with modern day problems with ancient brains. And so we're not aware of why we still feel this way, but every single one of us struggles with it. So once we have that awareness, what would you say is that first step to breaking out of that habitual pattern of thinking, of acting, of playing to not lose rather than playing to win, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think the first step happens before you're in the throes of, a FOPO moment. And let me describe that FOPO moment first, the mechanism of it, and then I'll answer it with what I think is the most essential work. So there's 3 phases to FOPO, right? And the first is anticipation. So and that's the bulk of the process of FOPO. It's the anticipation before you're even in front of somebody, before you've even arrived at the social event or the party or the work setting or whatever it is. It's anticipating, what are they going to think of me? So it's all of the rumination and the machination, the internal thinking and worrying about, are you good enough in the eyes of others? Some people want to call it an imposter syndrome. I'm pointing to its cousin, which would be FOPO. You're actually afraid of what they think of you. You're not necessarily afraid that you're going to be found out. You're just afraid what they will think of you.
Yeah.
And so it's all that anticipation. It could show up. The first kind of beginnings of it could happen in your closet when you're deciding what you're going to wear for the event later in the day. And if you're choosing whatever you're choosing for the approval of other people, you're probably starting off on, the path in error. If you're choosing something that feels comfortable and you're like, listen, I know the assignment. I want to feel a certain way. Clothes are an important part of it. And I'm going to fit in just fine because I'm going to be kind, as opposed to wear the designer, whatever. And I'm going to fit in just fine because I'm going to be curious. And I'm going to actually enhance the environment because I'm going to bring something to the table whatever the social table is, as opposed to I want to, the spotlight's going to be on me and I want to make sure that I look the part. So there's two different paths there, and that's all happening, or reinforced in your closet. The second part from the anticipation phase is the checking. When you're actually in the environment with another person, and instead of listening carefully and attending to their experience or the environmental conditions that are taking place, is that instead of doing that, attending to the task at hand, you are focusing on their micro expressions, their expressions, their tone of voice, all the things as indicators of are you being accepted or critiqued or judged or pushed out. And so it's this scanning to see if you're okay, scanning to see if you are potentially being phased out of the relationship. Okay, so that's the second phase, and that's really intense. And then the third is responding. And the way that there's 5 predictable ways that we respond to FOPO, but the response is at the slightest little trigger of being rejected. There's a handful of things that we do to normalize, to be okay. And so that is some of the beginnings of how those 3 phases work. And then I can get into the responding if you want, but I want to answer your question directly, which is in your quiet time, whenever that might be for you. And we found some research that people would rather shock themselves than to be with their own thoughts, which is
it's mind-boggling to me. I've seen that as well. I've seen that as well. It's insane.
Yeah. So, okay. So taking a look at your sense of self, and are you primarily designed to have a performance-based identity, meaning that you are what you do, not who you are, but you are what you do relative to other people. Meaning my sense of self, if I have a performance-based identity as a sports psychologist, the first is that I'm labeling me as my role. Who are you, Mike? I'm a sports psychologist. Okay, now I'm already down the path of a performance-based identity. And I want to be clear, a performance-based identity might get you a world championship. It might get you on the world stage. It might get you really good. No doubt about it. In the West, we are obsessed with performance. Our culture is completely obsessed with it. It would make sense by default, we would adopt an identity that is supported by our obsession of performance. We call it a performance-based identity. And I'm not saying that it's not part of the ecosystem of high performance, but it's not necessarily going to help you live a fulfilled life, because there's trappings in the performance-based. Because not only is it, this is what I am, what I do is what I am, but it's relative to the other sports psychologists. It's relative to the other attorneys or athletes. How famous, how much money, how good are they at what they do? And I'm just trying to see if I'm fitting in, or I'm blowing the doors off the thing to be the absolute flat out best. And I'm going to sacrifice a lot for that because I don't know how good somebody else is. So I am going to pour all in and chip all in to be better than them. So that's very different than a love affair with unlocking the nuances of your craft, a love affair with figuring something out that was difficult to figure out, a love affair with the experience of being part of something bigger than you. So what I'm describing there is a purpose-based identity. So going from a performance-based to a purpose-based, that might be the greatest yardage that takes place for people. And that purpose-based is very clear. A purpose-based identity has 3 main components. It matters to you. Nobody can give you your purpose, but you're very clear on the thing that is meaningful to you. It's bigger than you. You can't solve it alone. You need to, be part of an organization or a community or a tribe of people that are committed to that same shared purpose. And so you recognize that you are part of the fabric. You are not the fabric in and of itself. And then the third is that it's so big and so meaningful and so powerful that there's a future orientation, meaning that it can't be solved today. It can't be solved this week. It might not be solved in your lifetime, but you're going to chip in and figure it out. So that love affair with being part of something bigger that matters to you is very different than the spotlight and the metallic nature of look at me, look how much I've achieved and done. And that's my measure of life success. So those are the two different paths, and there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah, that switch, I could assume in the positions that you're in, is even more difficult for the people that is their identity, right? Like whether it's a CEO, a founder that you're working with, or it's a team and it's a specific person that you're working with, that this is my career, this is who I am. It's probably difficult to detach themselves, especially when that's their entire life to that point. And
100%.
the first rule of
100%.
mastery is to work from the inside out, right? And so working from the inside out, I think a lot of people, and I think you'd agree on this as well, is that the most growth in life is invisible. It's like the stuff that you don't see. And it's not the stuff in the external that we can measure, because that's usually the stuff that's performance based. So how do we get to the point where we stop measuring ourselves based on performance and move more towards that? Because I feel a lot of people get to the end of their day with a full day, but not a fulfilled day. And there's a big difference there.
Yeah, amen. How do we do it? The unfortunate way, that is the most common way, is to feel the pain associated with any of the suffering that comes from, that comes in life. I won't even tie it back to performance-based identity, but when we feel pain, that is the broth for change.
Mhm.
And when we numb ourselves, social media, we numb ourselves with TV or surface conversations, and there's a place for all of that. But when we're numbing ourselves with alcohol, drugs, pornography, whatever it might be, that in and of itself keeps us on our surface, and it removes us from feeling pain. And when you get down to it and you feel some suffering and pain, you say, well, I don't want this anymore. There's got to be a better way. And you kind of come back and open your eyes and you're like, wait, hold on. What are those best practices? What are people that live the fulfilled life? How do they work from the inside out? And that's all the study of sports psychology is it's studying how the extraordinaries use their mind and the practices and best habits for them to be their very best. And the cool thing about this, James, is we can train our mind.
Right.
And that is something that is relatively new in the world of psychology, like mental skills training. Athletes have been doing it for a long time, 50, 60 years. And the rest of us are just catching up with some of those best practices. When I see one of the world's best, of course, they're physically talented, and likely their genetic physical traits have been well matched with their environment. However, that's not always the case. There are people in the NFL that are my size, 5'10", and they are extraordinary at what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they have worked so hard to train their mind, to train their craft, and to train their body. The best in the world train all three. So when I see somebody that's extraordinary, I don't see just a physical freak. I don't see somebody that is born that way. They've all put in real work. Not everybody has trained their mind, but on the world stage, most of them have been very disciplined with the way that they think.
Mm-hmm.
They back themselves. They speak to themselves in ways to help give them a chance when the competition is heavy. And some are very disciplined and structured with it, and some are a little bit looser. So we study the best in the world to say, how do you do it? And from a psychological perspective, those best practices are available to all of us.
One thing that I find fascinating about what you do is that I think a lot of people would assume that as a sports psychologist, you kind of just go in and you give the people the advice that they need to get back to where they are. what I think the truth of this, and I would love your perspective on it, is that you help the best get back to their best because they've already been at their best, right? And so you kind of ask them the questions and get them back to where they want to be. So what are some of those questions that you ask people to kind of get them back to the point where they are helping themselves more than they're hurting themselves, whether that's mental or physical or whatever that comes
Yeah,
to?
it's really cool. It's a great insight. Again, I'm spending much more time now translating those best practices out from sport, outside of sport, into business and into other environments.
Mm.
So the questions that I tend to ask people is, who are you? It's one of the foundational big questions in life.
Yeah.
What is your purpose? And most people do not have clarity on either of those. They're really big.
Yeah.
And the other one is, what is your guiding philosophy? In other words, is there a sentence or a set of words that guide your thoughts, words, and actions? And most people kind of look blank, like, I don't know. And all of that is a bit of a framework to help have some sturdiness to how you go into heavy environments or consequential environments or performance-based or pressure-packed environments, is to have some sort of framework and sturdiness. So you're not just always making it up as you go, that you're like, listen, my philosophy is, and that's what guides my thoughts, words, and actions. My purpose is, and that's why I'm committed to doing this work, because it's bigger than me. And at my center, this is who I am, and I'm just trying to figure it out day to day. And then I'll ask them, and sometimes we just need to ask those questions and put a pin in them because they're kind of too big. And there's no secret path to any of this. There are no 7 steps. There's no tricks. There's no hacks. There's no secrets here. You can answer those questions on your own by getting a pen and paper out, having a conversation with somebody else, or meditating. Those are the 3 best practices for insight. You can do that work by yourself, or in one of those three ways. But when you do it with somebody who has wisdom and they've been down the path many of times before you, it just kind of speeds up the process. So I would recommend, that's why I recommend going and talking to somebody like a sports psychologist or person with wisdom. It's so powerful to do it. Okay, that being said, sometimes we pin those, and then I'll ask questions such as, tell me what it's like when you're at your best. What is that like? Bring me into it. Let me understand it. And then I'll ask, after I really understand the fabric of it, I'll say, what's it like when you're really struggling? And then we get the compare contrast opportunity to say, well, okay, so tell me what the difference is. And they lay it out and say, right, what are the skills that you use to be your very best? And if they don't know, they'll ask me to help them out there a little bit. And then like self-talk, breathing, mental imagery, deep focus, having great awareness, being psychologically agile, clear goals, connected to their teammates. All of those can be built. And so then we just go to the woodshed and we start building great self-talk, great breathing practices, great imagery practice, being a great teammate, fill in the blanks. And that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
You say that having someone outside of yourself, a coach, in some aspect is so powerful. I believe in it immensely, because if you have someone outside of yourself, just having a space to be vulnerable and open and share your thoughts is one of the most transformative things that I've experienced personally. I think your longest mentor is Gary de Blasio. I might be saying his name wrong, but what were some of the things that you worked on with him? And obviously it's been a long time, that have stuck with you throughout working with him.
James, well done on your research, mate. Well done. He holds a mirror up. That's it. So he is, he doesn't have like a prescription of how he does it, but he is so present and listens so well that he just holds a mirror up to me so that I can see and feel myself in a way that sometimes I've got blind spots and I'm clouded or I'm not seeing something. And so just having another person that completely knows you and is there to be in service of you.
Yeah.
That's kind of the the big gift of a mentor-mentee is that they're going to give their time without any remuneration. There's no payment, and they're just like, listen, I'm here because I think you're cool. I'm here because I think that I see me in you in some ways, and I want to reinvest, and I'm here for you. And then it's up to the mentee to bring their self forward. And so, like Gary will say, a couple questions that have stuck out with me over the years. I was in a pretty anxious place in my life. This was in my college years. And he said, Mike, when was the last time that you felt a sense of peace? So, oh, God. So James, when was the last time you, let me pass on Gary's gift to me, now to you. When was the last time you felt a sense of peace in your life?
I think most days the thought of being shocked before I sit with myself blows me away personally, because meditation has been a practice of my life for the past 3 years, almost every single day. I've probably meditated for at least tens of hours over the past couple of years, just meditating. So when I'm sitting with myself, that's the time where I get still and I allow myself to find that peace. And that's been something that's a really big practice this year for sure.
So the last time you felt a sense of peace was today during your meditation.
Yeah.
That's cool. Sometimes meditation for me, it feels like a standing civil war.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like it's really hard. I've been practicing 20 some years, and not everyone is peaceful for me. So yeah, very cool. So another question that he would ask on a semi-regular basis is, so what do you think you're afraid of here? It's just a simple little question. When I've got a blind spot or something going on. So what do you think you're afraid of here? And then other times, like what he would do is he would just hysterically laugh, and he's laughing at me. And he's like, oh God, like you still haven't gotten it. And he's like, maybe let's just go have some lunch. Like this conversation, you need more time, where you need to hit your head a couple more times and you'll figure it out. But listen, I'm tired of talking about this with you. And it's like, oh, okay. And then I'll say, wait, I don't get it. He goes, you're right. You just really, Mike, you really don't get it.
Yeah.
So it's that fire breather, truth teller, honesty, reflection that comes back. That's a great gift.
It absolutely is. We need that person in some way. And I think it's so powerful. And I'm with you on that. My meditations aren't always great, but a practice that has been really powerful for me this past year, I would say, is after I eat breakfast, I go on a walk, and no headphones, no nothing. And it's the most just, I'll express gratitude, all of the things that I'm grateful for, things I'm excited for the day, this podcast with you. And there's no thought other than the things I can be grateful for. And that's kind of hard to be in any other state of mind other than gratitude. So one thing I think.
Wait, before you go, where do you live, James? What part
I'm
of the
in
world?
upstate New York. Yeah.
All right. The reason I was asking is because I've got maybe a tool that some of your community might be interested in. It's a simple little morning mindset routine. And you do it before you even pull your sheets off. So it takes like 90 seconds. Of course, it could take longer if you really wanted to hydrate it. But I'm happy to send that out. It's a little audio file to describe it to you. But it's a nice little, simple little exercise that walks through 4 steps to help you just give yourself a chance to start in a position of like gratitude, intention, all the things that precede the good life.
Yeah. The leaning into some other things that you can help other people with is the psychological skills that we talked a little bit about before this. And I'm curious, what are some of the things that people may be overlooking or just completely unaware of that are psychological skills that can support them?
Okay, awesome. The most simple ones we've already hit on, which is confidence is a trainable skill.
Yep.
Being calm is a trainable skill, and that comes from breathing training. Confidence comes from self-talk training. Optimism is a trainable skill. Grit is a trainable skill. These are all the sub-factors that world's best tend to have in place. I haven't met a world's best that is not fundamentally optimistic.
Yeah.
Fundamentally optimistic. And that is a trainable skill. There's a whole self-discovery process to help people be their very best, which is like identify your purpose, your vision of a compelling future, your core philosophy, and your definition of high performance. There's a whole set of recovery practices that to help you, if you're going to really get after it in your life, to recover in an intelligent way. And then the idea that, you of all people need to know how to trust yourself. Because if you want to be your very best, it means that you're going to spend time at the messy edge where you don't have it all together. And that's where adaptation and growth really happens, is at that messy edge where you feel like you could fall apart into 1,000 pieces, or you just might unlock the next, great insight. And then mindfulness is the next. So there's 5 main factors: mindfulness, self-discovery, psychological skills, and psychological framework. And those 5 factors are in recovery. Sorry. Those are the ones that on a regular basis, best in the world are training every day. And we built a course. We've got Olympians, head coaches of NFL franchises, world's best record holders that help you understand how to do it in a very simple, delightful, easy to track way.
Talking about the people that you've worked with, one thing that I think is just coming up now is Russell Wilson was just traded to the Steelers. I'm a massive Steelers fan, so I'm just selfishly have to put that out there. But you worked with him. You worked with a lot of people from that team for a long time. And I could assume, as you said, the one thing that's common is that there is this optimism that's just a part of so many people. And you have to be optimistic to believe that there is an opportunity. Where does delusion fit in there? Is there a sense of delusion, or what's your perspective on just delusional optimism, say, for example?
Well, delusional optimism is problematic. It's also considered naive optimism. Like the world's going to be better, but we don't have to do anything. It's just going to fix itself.
Right.
This relationship's going to be better, even though I'm embarrassed every time we go into public because you say things to make me feel where I start to feel small. But you say it's going to be better, so it's just going to be better. I trust you. That's naive. Mm-hmm. So grounded optimism is this idea that, no, I can see a better way. I can see how it might just be a little bit better later. And I see I see how I need to play a part in that. So that's grounded optimism. Delusional optimism is a really interesting idea. And delusional optimism, if you take like the Steve Jobs and, those types of folks that really changed our understanding of what's possible, that many of them operate in what people would call their vortex. So you get sucked into their vortex. Like they see something that others can't see. So we call it delusional, but they see it and they believe it. So I don't know. I mean, if this is like an interesting spin on psychology, if somebody comes into my office as a trained psychologist and they're talking gibberish, it's called word salad, and they're pulling together these really bizarre ideas that sound really intelligent, but I can't quite follow them, it might just be schizophrenia. But if they're pulling together these bizarre ideas that have a logic thread through that is easy to follow, but a bit unbelievable, and they don't have word salad, they don't have paranoia, they don't have these other sub-capabilities, we see those people as being genius, even though the rest of the world can't see what they see. Right. So part of using your imagination to see something that is so compelling that you can barely see it, and you spend time to bring it into Technicolor, to really have the details of that vision, and you're using your imagination for a future that is bigger, brighter, the most amazing you can imagine. And your community, let's say your family can't see it. Let's say that your neighborhood can't see it. Let's say that the region of the world that you are in can't see it. Let's say the globe can't see it, but you can. I'm not sure I would call that delusional. And most of the people that break boundaries and frontiers like Felix Baumgartner, who I
Interesting.
spent a bunch of time with, who jumped from 130,000 feet
Yeah.
for what was called the Red Bull Stratos program. He wanted to do something that the brightest minds in aerospace said, look, we don't think that we're not sure. We don't know if you pass through the speed of sound, that your body will be what's called a transonic experience, and meaning that your head and your torso will be doing Mach 1, but because your arms and legs have a drag on them, that they will do slower. They'll be slower than Mach 1, and we don't know when you pass through the sound barrier if your arms and legs are going to rip off. And some would say he was crazy. Some would say his idea was delusional. But you know what? It was calculated. It was thoughtful. He is not crazy. He is incredibly skilled, has all of his wits about him, and was very exacting in what he needed for him to be safe. And so I think the naive looks at people like that are on the frontier and pushing hard, that they are different and crazy. But we have missed, like with Felix, who jumped from 130,000 feet, the edge of space, if you will, the stratosphere.
Yeah.
We missed him jumping off the curb in an exceptional way when he was 3 years old. We missed that. When you and I were not jumping off curbs, we were just barely trying to figure out how to walk okay, you know?
Mhm.
And we missed him jumping out of a tree at 7, but it was a little bit higher than everybody else's. So we missed all the little things that he was doing along the way that gave him the ability to see the future, the horizon, differently than you and me. And that's, I love that. I love that. We need them. It is not for everybody. And they keep me up at night too, because like we end up building these beautiful, honest relationships that are complicated because I'm supporting them to do something that they could die.
Yeah.
And it keeps me up at night. They're going to do it with or without me. And it's on. It's like, it's real how they're structuring their life. They look at people like me that spent an enormous amount of time in research libraries.
Mhm.
They look at people like the executives that I spend time with and think we're crazy. Wait, you're going to let the fluorescent light be your light?
Right.
Man, there's a beautiful sunlight out there. What are you doing? You're going to let right angles in a man-made building be your inhabitants when you could go be in the wild with all the curves of Mother Nature? Like, who's crazy? You're going to sit all day long, and to the place that you're going to find yourself with a backache and hip ache and ulcers and anxiety. And like, that's what you're going to do? You're going to work at a job where 8 out of 10 of your teammates are not engaged? Really? You're going to live with people that are disengaged from the thing that they're paid to do? What are you doing? And so 2 out of 10 on average, are engaged in multinational big businesses. 2 out of 10 report being engaged. Let's double it. Let's say 4 out of 10 are engaged. If 4 out of 10 people were engaged on a professional sport team, we would be laughed out of the league. And in big business, somehow we've created systems where it doesn't force us to be engaged. And when we get leadership that gets in there that says, look, there's too much slop in the system. This isn't going to work. We are going to create visible or transparent or observable metrics of success. People freak out. They freak out. They're like, it's too hostile, and like there's a force ranking and a stack ranking, and like it's too much. But that is how the sport world works every day. You know exactly on the depth chart where you are. Your people that are trying to take your job watch you every day, the mistakes you're making, the success that you're having. You're expected to get along well with them. And then you're doing all of that vulnerably so in front of your coaches that determine if you're going to get playtime or not. And then you go do it on a Sunday, in the NFL at least, in front of millions of people and you have no idea how it's going to go. And every ball that you touch or don't touch is statted, and it's public. And I am in awe of what professional athletes are able to carry, because that level of anxiety, most people couldn't even imagine. And so I am not in awe of what they are physically able to do.
Right.
It's special, but I am in awe of what they are psychologically and emotionally able to do. And I am gutted by what happens after they leave the league, because the structure that they've grown up in is no longer there. And they go from, when you're in the NFL, your purpose is very clear. Be a great teammate, be your very best, and contribute to this shared vision of us maybe being the best in the world. Okay? It's very clear. The structure is there. You're coached, you're supported, you're challenged every day. And then you find yourself on the outside, when you're forced out or retired, whatever that looks like, and you find yourself in a working environment, like an enterprise corporate environment, and there's none of that good stuff. And you're left alone, basically, to figure it out. And it's loveless and it's lifeless. And I think it is one of the more tragic things that we're doing to the human experience, is not making it as incredibly simple, which is this very simple statement: I'm going to help you be your best. That's it. That's my role in your life. I'm going to help you be your best. And to do that, I need to be my very best on a regular basis. And it's that simple. I'm going to help you be your very best. And if we agree on that, that's what my mentor has done for me. That's what my wife has done for me. That's what I hope I do for both of them and all of my clients. If we do that, we end up creating something pretty special. We end up building relationships that can endure a lot. And it's through those relationships that we become what we're capable of becoming.
I've heard you say that the best of the best, the reason that they're at that place is that they organize their life to get better. And it seems as though when people leave, whether it's a job, an organization, a team, they don't have an outlet to get better at. Like, they have to figure out something else outside of themselves that is not a part of their past identity to work on, to make them feel like they have a purpose in this life. There's a reason that most people, when they retire, they end up passing away not long after, because they lose their purpose in life, right? So how have you seen, or what have you helped people do to kind of find a light in life again after they leave the one thing that is who they perceive themselves to be, their life in itself, of this identity of, this is who I am. Now that's not me anymore. Now how do I find something in life?
I would say it's never been them. So it was an environment where they could work themselves out,
Right.
do the inner work and the outer work. And what they do is not who they are. And that's a mistake that happens early on, is that people say, I am what I do, and I am
Right.
what I do relative to how well you do it. And that's a performance-based identity.
Right.
So one of the translations from high octane, agile, exacting, high speed, high pressure, high stress environments is to be very clear about your purpose, be very clear about your guiding philosophy, your core principles that help shape your thoughts, words, and actions, and a compelling future that you're working towards. And then find the team that either develop the team or be part of a team that is inspiring. And again, when we go into the workforce and only 2 out of the 10 people are switched on, it's not the right recipe. And that's one of the reasons that they don't find themselves thriving in those environments. And that's one of the reasons that athletes do find themselves in leadership roles, because they're like, I know what team is. I know what inspired feels like. And so modern leadership, great modern leadership, will understand basic applied psychology. Just good old basic applied psychology, not psychotherapy, but good old basic applied psychology that they can infuse in the rhythm of business. And that's where modern leadership is going.
How much would you say of mastery is in our own hands?
Yeah, the whole thing. Mastery of craft and mastery of self. Mastery of craft is a lifelong pursuit, and mastery of self is the same. And mastery of self is it's the path. Let me be more clear.
Mm.
It's the path, being on the path, that is the good life. And it is what mastery really is about. It's not, look at this shiny metallic thing that I've built or that I've won. That's high performance. So mastery is about being on the path. There's a contour, there's a warmth to it, there's a sharp edge about, am I being honest with myself, and am I growing at a rate that is honest for my ambitions? Am I doing the internal work? That is the work to do. The secondary, tactical, technical, external work is, for most people, primary, but
Sure.
for mastery, it is secondary. It's the excuse. It's the reason to, not the reason. It's the tangible physical form that we can see if we're truly mastering our inner life. So I say 100% of mastery is within our control.
There's a quote that has stuck with me for a few years, and it's that all that matters is how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself. I think Tom Bilyeu was the one that I heard it from. And the reason I want to bring that up is I've heard you speak in a few podcasts. I want to say it was Rich Roll recently, which the episode was profound.
Thank you.
But we get to a point where we're at home with ourselves is something that I feel like you continue to bring up in that. And I think as the first rule of mastery is like working from the inside out, is like, how do we get to a point where, how have you even got to a point where you're at home with yourself?
I would say more often,
Mm.
like the sublime transcendental kind of shot into heaven, is like
Yeah.
when you've fully enlightened and you are at home with yourself wherever you go. So it's aspirationally trying to do it more often. There's no secret. I think I've shared what those best practices are. It's being very clear about purpose, philosophy, vision, and then living with conviction towards your purpose, the shared vision, and your philosophy, living with conviction when it's hard to do so. And in between clarity of those principles and conviction is where you flex your mental skills. And so most people, this is why, like, it's really hard for most people, is that they're not clear. And then they struggle with the conviction because they don't have the mental skills. So it's just doing the work. And whatever arena, I've used the phrase often, the passion trap. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not interested in helping somebody find the thing that they're passionate about and then go do that thing.
Yeah.
I think that we can find passion in everything and anything that we do when we know how to work from the inside out, whether that is taking the trash out, whether that's doing the dishes, whether that is changing oil in a car, whether that is in a conversation. Can you bring forward that zest and fire and that deep curiosity and excitement for the unfolding, unpredictable unknown more often than not? And when you're on the more often than not side, life tends to get a little bit more fun, a little bit more passionate, a little bit easier.
Yeah.
And the most powerful people are not those that the external world influences or dictates their internal experience. The most powerful are the ones that work from the inside out, develop the psychological skills, clarity of first principles, and then are able to influence the world around them. So that is the person I'm trying to be. And mechanically, it's like, I've got a set of practices every day that I do. Some are mental, psychological, some are technical, and some are physical. And the totality of that is like the spiritual approach to life. So I'm just pointing to, not, I can't help you be technically more proficient. I can help you be psychologically better. And so training breathing, training meditation, training journaling, training conversations with people of wisdom, all the things we've already talked about in this conversation,
Of course.
they're regular practices.
Yeah, I think it has to be both. All right. You have to have the proof, but you also have to have the belief or that ingrained sense of self. If someone's starting from a defeating narrative, as me and you both did, what do you believe is more important, to have the belief or to find some way to gain the proof, if that makes sense?
Belief. Yeah. So the question often is asked in another way too, which is like, what comes first, success or confidence?
Right.
Confidence. It's certainly first sustainability. So sometimes success happens and you're not confident, and you know that, and you kind of got lucky, and that's why you move into the next challenge with a little bit of anxiety, because you didn't have the mechanics of confidence down. You didn't know how to trust yourself. Both of those are trainable skills. And so, and you train them through self-talk. And then there's a whole set of practices, there's lots of them, but set of practices to help you be great with your self-talk. And that's what the training is. And I'll just, James, to be clear, I don't think you would ascribe to this, but fake it till you make it is like one of the honestly stupidest things that I'm not calling you stupid if you like it, but it is a stupid practice. Like faking anything is like exactly opposite of what authentic, real power comes from. There's nothing in nature that's fake. And if you're ever confused, tap into what Mother Nature has to say. There's no fake trees in Mother Nature. There's no fake wind. There's no fake roots. There's no fake fruit. Like we're not faking anything. Is a human-made construct that is weak.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to fake it, you know that you're full of it. And so I would just caution anybody that is trying to do the fake it till you make it approach.
I love it. I love you calling people out too. I think a lot of people have that perspective. I think they're starting from nothing, and I think it's powerful. There's one last question I ask every guest. My question to you is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
Belief am I currently unlearning? The simplicity of history. I've been on a learning curve to understand global world history better than what I learned when I was younger. And so I'm trying to unlearn some of the early models and narratives that I was taught. And so it's good. It's actually not that hard. I know that some people think it's really, for me, it's not that hard. It's like, oh, now with all of these life experiences and different frameworks, and I look at the simplicity of the models I was taught from some very inspired books, that I'm like, I don't see it that way anymore. And so it's more of like, I'm not necessarily unlearning them. I am no longer hydrate or watering those ideas. And so it's creating more space for something new to be in its place.
It's powerful. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. Of course, all of your links for the podcast and the book and everything else will be in the link or in the show notes below. But is there anywhere you'd like to direct people?
Yeah, thanks, James. I really appreciate the conversation. Findingmastery.com is the place that you can find our podcast. You can find our social. You can find the course that I mentioned and the morning mindset routine, and the book as well, FOPO, The First Rule of Mastery. So that would be the easiest place. And if people are on social, at Michael Gervais, and it's spelled Gervais on all the social handles.